أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to our viewers and listeners. This is study 24 of the Ramadan Daily Quran studies for the year 2020. I am Zahid Aziz and I'm delivering these for the Ahmadi Anjuman Ishaat Islam, Lahore, UK. And apart from being study 24, it's the third one on the series on this belief in the naskh or abrogation. As time passed after early Islam, commentators of the Quran, and they were all largely writing, in fact almost exclusively writing in Arabic, increased the number of verses that they considered to be abrogated by other verses. Maulana Muhammad Ali, the first head of the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement, he wrote a detailed analysis and refutation of this belief in abrogation as early as the year 1907, which was during the life of the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib. And he wrote this within a series of articles which were called Purity of the Text of the Quran. And within that, in the year 1907, he dealt with this belief in naskh. And he writes in there about the commentators of the Quran that they made the theory of abrogation a device for getting out of a difficulty. And some of them declared hundreds of verses to have been abrogated. Wrong interpretations of verses were adopted. And then because they clashed with other verses of the Holy Quran, they were declared to be abrogated. For some time, the commentators seem to have vied with one another, in other words, competed with one another, in declaring the Quranic verses to be abrogated. In other words, who can declare more verses to be abrogated? A sort of contest. Now, later on, this large number of verses believed to be abrogated analyzed by a great Islamic scholar, Jalaluddin Suyuti, who was an author and commentator of the Quran himself, who was writing in the 1400s. So that's about 600 years before our time, before the present time. So his analysis of these verses said to be abrogated, is given in his book Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, which actually is available in English under the title The Perfect Guide to the Sciences of the Quran. So writing in the 1400s, in that is the 15th century of the Christian era, he dismissed the idea of abrogation in most of those allegedly abrogated verses, but considered that it did apply to 21 verses. That yes, there were 21 verses in the Quran about which we can say they have been abrogated by later verses. Then another 300 years passed, and a great famous scholar and translator of the Quran into Persian appeared in India, extremely famous. His name is Shah Waliullah of Delhi. He's the author of numerous books on Islam, some of which have been translated into English. Now, he was in the 1700s, so that's nearly 300 years before our present time. He analyzed those 21 verses which the last person, Jalaluddin Suyuti, said had been abrogated. He analyzed them in his book, Fawzul Kabir. And he concluded that 16 of these were not abrogated, 16 of these 21, but that about five of them, he had to apparently admit that they were abrogated. Now, in terms of time, then, we come to the late 1800s, just before the founding of the Ahmadiyya movement. Hazrat Maulana Nuruddin, who later became the first pledged member of the Ahmadiyya movement, and then later on he became the first head of the Ahmadiyya movement after the death of the founder. That was all later on. He related an interesting episode from the time of his youth when he was staying and studying in Medina, in Arabia. Someone gave him a book to read which mentioned 600 verses of the Quran as being abrogated. Maulana Nuruddin was unhappy at reading this, but he said, I am a young man, I am capable of memorizing all these 600 verses, so I know that these have been abrogated. Then he was given that book, Ittiqan, I've mentioned, by Jalaluddin Suyuti to read by some teacher. And he was pleased to see that it greatly reduced the number of abrogated verses to around 20 or 21. And Maulana Nuruddin thought of memorizing all of them. But he happened to have in his possession Shah Waliullah's book, Fawzul Kabir, which he hadn't read. So he then read that, and in there he read that only 5 verses were abrogated. And later on, many years later, when he narrated all this, he said, I was extremely pleased to read this, that only 5 verses were abrogated. When I pondered over these 5 verses, God made me understand that the whole concept of abrogation must be baseless, because one says 600 verses are abrogated, another says about 20 verses, and yet another makes it 5. This shows that it is only a matter of human judgment on how you interpret a verse of the Quran. And then Maulana Nuruddin relates that in the next few years, after he returned to India from Arabia, after completing his studies, he first found a book. You see, he now kept on looking for those 5 verses and how others had interpreted them. First, he found a book in which 3 of those 5 were explained as not abrogated. Then he says he found another book in which the 4th one was considered as not abrogated. And finally, he came across yet another book which clarified the 5th and the last verse, that also wasn't abrogated. So the position was that regarding each and every verse which was declared abrogated in Islamic literature over the centuries, each and every verse, you could find some book or other, some Islamic opinion or other, saying that verse was not abrogated, but some other was. So regarding each and every verse declared abrogated by someone else had said that wasn't abrogated. Many years later, when Hazrat Maulana Nuruddin had been in the Ahmadiyya movement for about 15 years, this was the year 1904, he had cause to write a book, and the title of the book is Nuruddin. He had to write a book in response to a book called Tark-e-Islam, meaning leaving Islam, which was written by a former Muslim who had joined the Hindu Arya Samaj sect, and he had written this book, Tark-e-Islam, giving point by point reasons as a numbered list why he left Islam. And Maulana Nuruddin replied to his book in his book Nuruddin. And in answering one of that man's objections against Islam, Maulana Nuruddin wrote as follows, which I'm going to quote now. Obviously, I've translated it into English from Urdu. So Maulana Nuruddin wrote, I know of no verse in the Quran containing a command which permits something, or a verse which makes something compulsory, and then it is stated about the same command that what it had permitted or ordered is now forbidden. I know of no verse in the Quran about which that has happened. No, certainly not. This is what Maulana Nuruddin writes. No, certainly not. Our Quran has nowhere said to us that a certain command in a certain verse is now absolutely abrogated. Our guide, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, has never said that such and such a command of the Quran is now abrogated. His holy successors were Abu Bakr and Umar, about whom Allah has said in the Quran that Allah is well pleased with them and they are well pleased with him. They also never said that such and such a command of the Quran is abrogated and it is not now right to act upon it. If naskh means to make a command void, that is to say, a command is to be found in the Quran and it was abrogated, I know of no such command. If anyone claims to the contrary, he should provide evidence. And this is what Maulana Nuruddin has written in his book entitled Nuruddin, published in the year 1904 on pages 231 to 232. And 5 years later, in 1909, when he had become the head of the Ahmadiyya movement, in his Quran teaching sessions, he stated this. As to the question whether there is abrogation in the Quran or not, as far as my understanding goes, I will say that I have never till today seen any verse which is abrogated while it is found in the Quran. I've never seen any verse which is abrogated while it is found in the Quran. There is no statement reported from the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or Hazrat Abu Bakr or Umar Raziyallahu ta'ala anhu, showing that such verses are to be found in the Quran. So with that, study number 24 comes to an end. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quranil Azim wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wal zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malakun barur raufur rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.